Hi, this is Siofra Bradigan, and this is Siofra's Magic Alcove. So, conversations about sacrifice, self sacrifice, all that stuff have come up in the last couple of days, and I thought it would make a good subject to talk about how we break some of these things down. And this is sort of an important concept. Um, I believe that it's pretty interwoven between most spiritual beliefs and religious practices around the globe. And the question is it a good idea? Does it hold up? Is does it have a solid foundation? Is there a reason for it? How can it get us in trouble? That kind of thing. So when I was a kid growing up, I watched a lot of movies about saints. My mother loved saint movies, and I can't remember specifically all the different ones I saw, but she watched a lot of them. And they were the old, late 50s, early 60s kind of films because I was born in 1950. And so they all had this message of sainthood, like how do you become a saint? And I was very interested in that whole idea because of my environment in my household. Somehow I got the notion, probably from watching some of these movies, that if I was perfect, then everything else around me would also be perfect. And so becoming a perfect person, not having bad feelings, et cetera, was kind of one of my main strategies that I adopted at a very early age, which doesn't work, but that's where I was at. And so a lot of those movies talked about the concept of sacrifice. And I think it was one of the movies about the miracle at Lourdes with the three children that saw the vision of Mary and her prophecies, and, one of the more famous Marian visitations that have happened in recent history. And the girl grew up and joined a nunnery. If I'm wrong, that's okay, because it's one of those things that memory being what it is. But whatever the movie was, this woman joined a nunnery, and people were suspicious of her, the other nuns. They weren't sure if she was worthy, etc., of what had happened to her, that kind of thing. They noticed that she was limping somewhat, and she was doing her duties and doing her prayers, etc., etc. She was extremely dedicated and devoted to her religion, um, which was obviously Catholicism because she was a nun. And at one point, towards the end of the movie, she dies. And when they examine her body, they discover that her leg had been rotting away. She had cancer of the leg, bone cancer, something like that. And everyone was very impressed that she hadn't complained and that she continued to do her work and praise God, etc. And she was granted sainthood partially because of that. And of course, being pretty young and impressionable at the time, not being Catholic though, I was raised Methodist. Um, I absorbed that lesson about sacrificing yourself, your own health, your own well being, and so forth for the greater good, be it for God in her case or for other people, for those of us who weren't on our path towards sainthood. And I've realized that that is a pretty common thread that we get presented with, a very common concept that sacrificing yourself, your own health, your happiness, your joy, your dreams, your creativity, or whatever, in order to serve someone else's goal. And it can become a very dangerous idea. When I went through my shamanic dismemberment, and if you don't know what that is, watch the entire video about it because there's a lot there. At one point during my experience, the first night when I wasn't sleeping and couldn't use my body as a refuge, I could get back in my body, but everything was still there. All the thought forms and whatever and memories, etc., were just playing out in front of my face. Saw a bunch of past lives, etc., etc. But at this point, it was like Satan and his hordes, because I was raised in the church, so I knew about them, and they they were trying to make a deal with me. And the deal was, if I willingly went with them, sacrificed myself, my soul, or whatever, in exchange for that, they would save my husband, who I didn't know well enough yet as to what he actually was and whether he deserved saving. That's a whole different topic. But, and I was considering it because I was in a pretty strange state. I woke up my first husband and I told him what was happening. I said, these demons are here. They say I need to go with them to save you. And he says, you don't have to do anything you don't want to, and then promptly went back to sleep. So it's amazing how someone who's a horrible person can sometimes say the right thing, because that hadn't occurred to me in the state I was in. And so I thought, oh, well, I'm pretty sure I don't want to. And so I successfully passed through that potentially disastrous moment in my evolution in this lifetime by saying, no, I don't want to go. But it is part of the subject matter because I'm not the only person that this has happened to, this kind of scenario. I had a childhood friend who lives in Los Angeles, and one of my sisters asked me if I would contact her because she was going through some real intense situation, and for some reason she thought I could help. I find that interesting in and of itself. That people are send people to me, just whether they believe in what I am or what I do or not. Anyway, I called this person up. We'll call her D for privacy. So I called D up, and we're talking on the phone and texting and all the other usual stuff there. And she tells me there's a little bit of a backstory here. So previously, in another communication with her, she had started to see this psychic in the area who apparently reads people's parallel lives. Why that is a thing, I don't know. But D was with a really bad person in this reality. He was, what does he call him? A wise guy. He was in the mafia. Um, he abused her horrifically, beat her to a pulp, probably, had her gang raped by his friends, all these things that she had told me about him previously. So I knew who this guy was. And then she tells me that the psychic tells her in a parallel life, her and this guy get married, have children, and are extremely happy. I find this disgusting that anyone would promote the idea that if you are happy in another existence or a parallel world or whatever, that is a reason to stay with someone in the one that you're in. I guess they're saying there's the potential for them to be happy, when what she needed was someone to tell her to get away from this guy. I mean, he was just seriously bad news and very abusive. Again, sacrificing herself for him already in a lot of different ways. And I don't know what she thought she was getting in exchange for that particular sacrifice. She certainly sacrificed her body, her identity, her you know, destroyed her boundaries, um, tried to become something she thought he wanted, whatever. All really bad ideas. So at this point, she had broken off with him on in this reality or this plane, this earth, and she had a psychotic break. I don't know for sure what precipitated this particular psychotic break. She has had fantastical and magical thinking that's gotten her into trouble in the past, thinking demons were after her and so forth. So it could be that that was never effectively dealt with on any level. And certainly from way away from her, I did my best. So she told me directly that the demons that were in her house were telling them that they were torturing her former boyfriend, and they were torturing him like all the time and really tormenting him. And so they offered her the same deal that they had offered me. They say, if you willingly give yourself to us, then we will stop hurting him and we will leave him alone and he will be okay. But you have to like voluntarily come with us. Which I think is interesting too, that it has to be voluntary. So that's where I was at. She was actually considering committing suicide in order to give herself over to the demon horde to save her prior boyfriend who was so incredibly abusive to her. Like, was he worthy of the sacrifice at all is a different question, but she was about to do it. And so I talk about this in distance healing video about, you know, some of these events, and this is one of those where I went to her on the mental plane, found her in this incredible state, saw all the creature thingies that were around her and whatnot, and pulled her up into the Akasha because I could not communicate with her where she was at. And I don't do that very often. Talk to someone soul to soul, which is basically what that means. Pulling someone up into the Akasha, you're talking to their pure energy, their pure spirit, their essence, and so forth. And I got through to her that this was not a good idea, that they lied, that it wouldn't work, anything that came to mind that I could imprint upon her spirit so that it would go back down into this insanity, because it was a desperate situation, and it was a desperate ploy on my part, since she's very far away, Los Angeles and where I live. There's no way I'm going to be there. There's no way I can get there. And so I did what I could. I brought in Virgin Mary energy, since she is Catholic. And, I consider the Virgin Mary as one of the forms of the goddess that stayed in the world after they started destroying other forms of the goddess. They didn't feel, people, whoever decided these things, didn't feel threatened by a virgin. And, so they allowed that image to stay. And that was probably a good thing I did that, because that, I think, helped to connect with her. And, and then I lost contact with her. She like fell off the face of the earth. 6 months later, she reappeared, and I found out that she had called her psychiatrist and she'd gone into treatment. She'd been in an in-house treatment facility for the last 6 months. And she came out the other side. And although she is still prone to some fantastical thinking, um, there's obviously some serious damage to her thought processes that are from other events that happened in her life. She's active, she's a nurse, um, she has a life, and she's alive. Otherwise, she wouldn't have a life. So that is a parallel experience, very similar to mine. And of course, these are extreme examples of how the concept of sacrifice can lead you into very dangerous waters. But it certainly gave me food for thought and thinking about it, as a concept at all, because what it does in society for people who choose or are patterned and programmed to believe that this is a good idea, that there's nothing greater than to sacrifice yourself for someone else, it leads to some pretty strange and bizarre and unhealthy situations. For one, it tells the person that their feelings don't matter. If they choose to believe this, if they embrace this as an idea, they say marry someone who's not suitable, like my first and second husband. For me, um, the fact that they have made a commitment and they're going to sacrifice their happiness to support their spouse, whether it's a man or woman, it doesn't matter. Gender has nothing to do with this. This is just a power dynamic and personality dynamic kind of thing. So if I use gender specific terms, it's not that I'm just thinking in those specific terms, it's just a pattern of my own speech. But and I have certainly in my life have run across this whole notion of that. My first husband, after he went to prison for being a rapist, would try to manipulate my feelings on the subject of sacrifice. Like, who did I think I was, that I was so special and so important or whatever, that I should leave him and go on with my life instead of waiting for him to come out. It was like, you really missed the mark. And of course, at that time in my past, I was very much still in the whole embrace of trying to be perfect and trying to be correct, and had a wrong idea what that was anyway, even though I know now that it doesn't exist. There's also very wrong ideas of what it might be. And I had all of those. That's how he manipulated me through our marriage. The time I knew him was my desire to be perfect. That was a failing on my part that allowed him to manipulate me until I got well and understood what was happening and so forth. And thank goodness got away. But I remember one of the letters he sent to me from prison was pretty specific, like, oh, you poor thing, that you have to wait for a couple of years, and, while I'm in here, and so forth. And so, fail, 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 bad, bad, bad. But fortunately, I didn't fall for that. I'd been away from him. I'd gone back to my mother with my son, who's also his son, and had gotten enough distance from him. And with him being in prison up in Canada and me being back in the States, I got to see the situation at the beginning, began to see the situation for what it was. And I divorced him. And with my second husband, when I realized that I couldn't stay with him anymore, I actually had evolved enough to, I wasn't trying to protect myself. I still didn't understand. He didn't hit me directly. And so I still didn't understand the concept of mental abuse, emotional abuse, and so forth. He would like hit the wall in front of my face and put a hole in the wall thinking about my face, but he didn't hit me directly. So I still hadn't understood that just because you're not being hit doesn't mean you're not being abused. But he started doing it to our children. My first son, who for some reason every time he looked at him, he thought she had sex with someone else. I'm like, I was married. I was not a virgin when you met me. And he really took it out on my son. It was just a horrific environment for my son. And and then when I had our daughter, I in my brain thought that he could bond with her, and then maybe that would work. And I was always being accused of not being a good disciplinarian, not knowing how to raise children, blah blah blah, lots of judgment. So seriously, not perfect. It was a nightmare on so many levels. But when I decided I was going to divorce him, and I told him that I was leaving him, and he was quite flabbergasted because we had gotten married and I had made a vow, and he couldn't understand how I could even consider leaving him. And for me, making an oath, taking an oath, or making a vow is a very sacred thing. So I had a real hard time with that aspect of it. Like, I'm going to be breaking my word. My personal integrity is very important to me. I don't know exactly why, but it is. And I realized that, he had failed to live up to his end of the agreement or the contract. And so I really didn't owe him anything at that point. But that, again, his notion was that once we got married, it didn't matter what he did to me, how he treated me, how he talked to me, or the children, because he was certain that that would always be there. So it was a big shock to him. Anyway, he wanted to know why I wanted to divorce him, and I told him because he started slapping our daughter too, because she said a word, a swear word that she learned from him. Silly me pointed that out. If you don't want her to swear, don't swear around her because, she's a child and they don't understand that concept. But when that happened, I realized it didn't matter if it was his child or my child with someone else. It was just who he was. That's how he was going to treat them. And I determined to get away. And so I told him that was why I was divorcing him. And he said, that's not a good enough reason. You can't leave me for that, which kind of flabbergasted me. I didn't know I had to have a reason that the other person was okay with. That was like, so I asked, what is a reason? And he said, only if you have an affair. Are you having an affair? Well, I wasn't at the time. So I went out and did because I'm practical. It was very strange. Of course, then all the other stuff happened. I always knew you were blah, 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 but then I got to divorce him, which was my goal. And like I said, I'm very pragmatic and practical. And so it worked and he didn't fight me. But again, having children, um, as a mother or a parent, uh, putting your needs aside to raise the children, that is sort of built in, I think, biologically speaking. If you are attached to the little ones that you have in your life, you arrange things around, their needs, their sleep schedule, their food preferences, all that stuff. And that is not the kind of sacrifice I'm talking about, although it can lead to the kind I'm talking about, the self negation, where you have nothing at all. And even in that situation, when you're raising little ones, it's important to take care of yourself because you are just as important in this equation. It's not all about others. I was with a man in the Kispiox Valley who was a firewalker and practiced different types of yoga, etc. And he was of the opinion that my role in existence would be very worthwhile should I just take care of him so then he could become enlightened and save people. And then, my role in history would be this wondrous female presence or what have you that allowed him the time and space that he needed in order to become an enlightened being and save the world. And I actually almost swallowed that briefly, but I was very annoyed, extremely annoyed, more annoyed than I was swallowing it. I mean, again, it really dovetailed into that whole idea of sacrificing yourself for someone else. And this was like a spiritual goal. So, oh, wow, and of course, in Christianity, the whole thing, the whole religion starts off with someone doing the ultimate sacrifice, sacrificing their life for others. And so that built-in notion of sacrifice in the Abrahamic religions is pretty powerful. Um, and women are often the ones, in his case, he was not a woman, but still, the whole idea of sacrificing yourself for the greater good. And I can completely understand in a crisis situation where um, someone that you care about, or maybe even a stranger, depending on how you feel about things, is at risk of being harmed, and your instinct is to jump in to protect them. I have no problem with that. I think it's a horrific thing if the person who's trying to help ends up dead, but I can understand that impulse to protect, especially children. And we certainly see that happen in the United States. Excuse me. Sorry, had to pause for a cough break. Um, so yeah, we certainly see that in the news media a lot in our country, and I'm sure it's in other countries as well, when there's some kind of a mass shooting or casualty event, that there are some people that are there that make the ultimate sacrifice and die trying to protect someone that they care about. But the point of the conversation is to evaluate whether it's a good idea or what how much of it is a good idea, to think it through. This is part of shadow work, when you evaluate a obvious, in this case, social contract that everybody seems to think is just the way things are, and to kind of look at it from maybe a somewhat more distant perspective to see what are the implications. And my mother is a good example. You know a little bit about my family history, and my father tortured us. My mother was trained not to interfere because um, if she did, he would torture us more and make her watch. And, so a bad situation all around. But as I got older and would talk to my mother about why we weren't leaving, I mean, I really worked on her to try and get away from him. And she would say things like, well, if this, a father is better than no father. This was sort of her notion. And she gave up everything for us. She gave up her dreams of singing, of being a nurse, of helping people in a different way, and became a mother and a parent and a wife, and was tormented, and we were tormented. But she still had this notion that a family needed to have a father regardless of how the father acted. And I kept telling her, no father is better than this father. This is a bad father. We don't want this father. It's like, and eventually it worked between me and some of the neighbors. Um, we all finally got through to my mother, and we got out of there before my father killed us. So yay, that's why I'm here. Trying to convince my mother to stop sacrificing herself and us for him. I mean, because basically we were also sacrifices to my father's rage and um, sadistic desire to be in control, his power plays, all that other stuff, his frustrations at work that he took out on us, his hatred of being in the Navy, ad nauseum. So, that was another learning ground for me, not just the movies I watched as a kid, but my entire situation and how life evolved and what I saw and absorbed. So, what I learned from my situation. And to become a clear person, you have to be able to separate yourself from all those things and then make a conscious decision about whether it's a good idea or how much of it's a good idea, or whether it's something just to throw out and never do. I'm certainly not into total selfishness either. I think that's also a bad idea. And I can see why some people have gone that route because of this, sort of the pendulum swinging notion, which is, in my opinion, a silly way to live a life. Any life is to just go with whatever happens to be going on around you. But total selfishness is not a good state to be in any more than total self-sacrifice. Again, it's like balance, and we talk about balance a lot for a reason. You don't want to do too much of one thing, because too much of one thing becomes a bad thing. That's kind of the way it works, whatever it is, whether it's water or oxygen or food or, these things. So figuring out how to take care of yourself and identifying what your real needs are, especially in a relationship. I mean, knowing what your personal ethics are and what is and isn't okay with you, and being able to evaluate a relationship you're thinking of going into based on that kind of criteria rather than all the hormones and, sexual arousal feelings and so forth that begin in the attraction stage. Because if you're with the wrong person and you stay with the wrong person, you are sacrificing yourself and for them. Whether they appreciate it or know it or not, that's what's happening. That's the dynamic. And that's one of the reasons this whole concept is one of the reasons why people who are being abused in a relationship have such hard a time leaving, because they feel like a failure, that they have failed in this social contract that they may not have even identified, but they feel like they are failing at it. And then a lot of times we look at our partner and see their potential and what could be and so forth and try to work towards that. I have learned over the years that you cannot change anyone. What you see is what you get. And as I looked back at my relationships with the people I've been with that haven't worked, I have noticed that the thing that ended us was the thing was there at the start. And I just ignored it. I didn't pay attention to it. I thought it would change or it wasn't a big deal. And it was. It definitely became a very big deal. So finding out what it is that brings you joy, what it is, what activities it is that help you become involved in what you're doing and, just lose track of who you are in the moment that you're absorbed in a creative endeavor of some kind or activity, whatever it is. These are the things you need to know about yourself anyway. And when you learn that about yourself, then you can start paying attention to what the people that are in your life are doing. Are they expecting you, as either a partner or a friend, to always be there for them, whether you are available or not? Do they treat you with respect? Are you the person that is the go-to person that they always go to in order to get something done, that they always count on you for that? And then if you say no, do you get flack? I mean, people are going to ask for stuff. That's normal. That's fine. If you set a boundary and you say, no, I'm sorry, I don't have the energy for that. Um, I have other plans that I need to participate in. And by the way, I'm saying that out loud, but you don't need to have reasons. You don't necessarily need to explain why you're not going to do something or why you are going to do something, because it's your business, not theirs. And I can tell you again from personal experience, if you tell them why you're not available, they will start to argue with you if they're that kind of person. If they're a person who wants to manipulate you and get you to do what they want and what they need in order to make their life better, they will try to find a way to convince you that your reason is bad. This is why I recommend not giving them one. But this is your internal thought process. You can think about these things, but not necessarily share them, depending. And see how they react. I mean, seriously, if they're like, "Oh, I'm sorry, that's fine. I'll find somebody else, or I'll find another way to do this, or I appreciate you considering it," and something of that nature. But if their knee-jerk response is, well, that's a stupid idea, why do you think you need to do that? Or I really need you more than whatever it is that you're planning to do, and cry or use emotion or other forms of verbal manipulation and whatnot in order to get you to change your mind. This is what drives me crazy in movies. Seriously, I have a hard time watching a lot of movies, certain parts of them. And the thing that really annoys me in these budding romantic comedy relationships is they the same formulas, like person meets person. Okay, they're attracted to each other, or one's attracted to the other, or whatever. They want to do something that they like. The other person's not interested, so they cajole them, and they like give them a surprise so that they have to go anyway, or they take them out to dinner and they say, "You're going to really love this," and they say, "No, I don't want it, but you should try it," and they cajole them until they try it, and then of course they get together. So that gives us this notion that crossing people's boundaries for a good reason, like you want to get to know them better, which obviously they're not actually getting to know them better. They're trying to change them into something that they want, to make them enjoy something that they enjoy, instead of meeting them face to face where they're at and being like respectful of a no. We have that so many places. Um, and that does lead back to the self-sacrifice. So the person in the movie is sacrificing their taste buds or their time and their energy or their other interests that they might have. I mean, it's not a requirement, if you're in a relationship, that you both like all of exactly the same things. You can have differences. It's just if your core things are in agreement, you have a much better chance of having a healthy relationship. And of course, cults really prey on this notion of sacrifice. They also add the guilt and all the other stuff in there, but sacrifice is definitely a huge part of almost every cult I've looked at. In fact, all of them so far. I haven't seen one that doesn't have that component in it. The idea is you're giving up your life on earth here, whatever your desires are, your material wealth, your interests, your TV watching, whatever, in order to devote yourself and this life to helping others. So it can be to help bring in the new age, to create the fifth dimension, to become awakened or whatever. And all of it has to do with putting whatever's happening in this reality and in this world on the back burner as not important enough for you to be allowed to have, including relationships with others. With cults, they go deeper in, breaking off relationships with family, relatives, parents, etc., people that don't agree with them, and so forth, in order to keep you on track so you don't lose sight of the whole notion, the whole idea of why you're in it in the first place. Is you have to keep that person who's in a cult focused on the goal that they will never see, because they know that they'll never live to see the goal. Well, sometimes they're promised they might, but anyway. But that's the whole thing, is to keep them externally oriented and to sacrifice themselves for the lead of the group by giving them money, by giving them time and energy, by working for free, by going out and getting new recruits and bringing them in so that they can make more money, all of that. And that's all involved in this whole idea of sacrifice. So if we can look at sacrifice and understand it and see, you know, where we're willing to sacrifice our time because we care about somebody, and it's when you really want to do something, it's not a sacrifice, right? That is the point. The idea of sacrifice is doing something you don't want to do. That's sort of at the bottom of the sacrifice, giving up something you do want to have not something, to remove your identity, your boundaries, your personality, your needs, your desires, your interests, your joy out of the equation, as and in the background as being not valuable and not important enough for you to be allowed to have a life. And I think all of us need to think about this. When I was channeling, I mean, there's the other side of it, is like giving things and so forth. And Moira, one of the phrases that she said once that just always stuck with me Is a gift not freely given is not a gift at all. Most people give gifts of time and energy or objects in order to get something in return. It's sort of like a, quid pro quo. It's like, I'll do this for you, and then later down the road, you'll do something for me energetically or so forth. And there's another way of doing that. You don't have to, if you give something to someone and you're not attached to the result, what's going to come back, it allows the universe to give you back in so many different ways than just that one individual. And so that's how I look at it. Is like, giving my time and energy and my knowledge and so forth so that other people might benefit from it. If they do, great. If they don't, okay. If they don't want it, that's fine. My ego's not attached to that whole process there. And and then the universe brings me experiences and new people, and I mean, it's just, I don't feel like I'm being abused because I do take care of myself. If I'm too tired to do something, I will tell people. If it's not the right time of day or something, or I've got other things I have to do, like see clients or what have you, or I have another appointment, when I make a commitment, that's it. That's the commitment I make. And there's nothing short of a true emergency that will stop me from fulfilling that commitment, because that's my word, and my word means something to me. And the universe knows if I fail to fulfill my word. Not that things can't happen. I have to take somebody to the emergency room. Okay, that's it. Their priority is just jumped up to the top of the heap, and anything else that's going on is on the back burner until that's cleared out, and I can think about things and figure out what to do next, or if there's a thing to do. So um, I'm doing this video to give you some ideas of how this works negatively. So then you can figure out what you want to do with that information. If you want to reevaluate the choices you've made in your life, if you're not happy with who you are and with where you are, you might want to think about why. What are you doing to yourself, in this case, allowing others to do to you by participating in this notion of sacrificing your needs and your happiness and your joy for someone else or the greater good or whatever it happens to be. So I think that as human beings, we're more valuable when we have taken the time to evaluate our place and what do we want to do while we're here in this reality, in this world, in this life. How do we want to impact the environment that's around us, the people that are around us, the people we choose to allow close to us, and all of that stuff. Being an individual, individuated person with boundaries who has consciously chosen the path they want to walk. And it doesn't have to be like a strict, uh, narrow kind of a thing at all. It's like when you really get to know yourself, you find you have all different sides, lots of different facets. And there's nothing wrong with feeding them at, occasionally. Unless it's a harmful activity, you know, uh, that's what life is. Life is about cycles and about variety. I mean, no matter where you live, just look outside. How many kinds of birds visit your neighborhood? How many kinds of animals are around the town or city that you're in? How many different life forms might you have in your own house or in the garden outside or in the park nearby? It's like variety is the foundation of existence. And it's amazing. There's all kinds of things. So we also have that potential to have a wonderful, meaningful existence. Not that there aren't things that challenge us, and life has sometimes happens around us, whether we have anything to say about it or not, and we have to adapt. And I think adaptability is definitely important. But to let go of these like strict concepts of what's good, what's bad, Um, the people that are into others sacrificing for them use the idea that if you're not sacrificing, then you're a bad person because you're selfish. But there's a difference between being selfless, selfish, and self care. So, self care is what we're talking about here. You're important too. You need to have yourself on a priority. And occasionally you may choose to put yourself in the back burner for someone that you really care about, and that's okay too. It's not like this is how it has to be. It's just knowing that that's what you're doing. And if you do choose to help someone and then you don't like it, don't help them again, but don't complain to them about the fact that you went out of your way to help them because you decided to help them and that was your choice. So you just like learn from it and move on. Anyway, I think that probably covers the subject. And I like the idea of thinking about these things more than what kinds of spirits there might be out there, whether there's other universes, other dimensions, or any of that stuff. This is stuff that can help directly in the life that you're in right now and help you to transform your own existence to be something that you would be proud of, something that you would enjoy, that kind of thing. So, I guess that's it for today. And I hope everybody out there is doing really well. This is Siofra's Magic Alcove, and I'm Siofra Bradigan. Blessed be.